Hi guys, my name is Sean. I'm a houseplant enthusiast from Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you so much for coming back to my videos. We've reached 30,000 subscribers in about 9 months time. That's crazy. I never have imagined this for the channel. It shows that my content is relevant and that you guys are enjoying it and learning something good about plant care, propagations, and all that good stuff. And for those of you who are new to the channel, welcome, and please do consider subscribing and do send this video a like and comment down below if you have any thoughts about what we talked about today. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about pots, and the majority of the topic is going to be around terracotta versus plastic pots, and I'm going to give you the whole pros and cons about it and why we use them and in what circumstances do we use them. And I'll give you a tour at the end around the house to show you some of the plants that are in these setups. So disclaimer here, I do have a cheat sheet here because there's a lot that we're going to talk about and I don't want to miss any point. But the first thing is that we actually tend to choose pots based on how they look, like, oh, you know, does this plant look good or not? However, it goes far beyond that. Pots actually will determine the success, the longevity, and the happiness of your plant. So I'm going to share with you all these variables so you can make better informed decision about your plants. There are also many types of houseplant parents, and I'm not going to poo-poo anyone on what their habits are. For example, some people may just want to keep plants for aesthetic reasons. They want them to style the space. For me personally, I tend to like plants to thrive and see how I can replicate their natural environment in my home and have them grow really fast, propagate them. So looks for me is not as important. That's why I'm actually very open-minded to plastic or terracotta pots depending on the plant species. And I've tried both, and sometimes I would have the same species grown in 2 different types of pots just to see how they do, and I'm here to share with you that experience. Okay, so let's get the first thing out of the way, which is terracotta versus plastic. What are the pros and cons? And I'm not going to be talking about the aesthetics here because that is very, very subjective. I'm going to be talking purely about the function between these 2 pots. And number 1, terracotta pot actually dries out 2 to 3 times faster than plastic pots. This is the same whether you're indoors or outdoors. And I want to remind you guys that when you have plants indoors, they are going to dry out 2 to 3 times slower than when they're outdoors. So keep that in mind in terms of watering frequency. And the reason the terracotta pots dries up so fast is because they're made of clay, and that's actually very porous material that will actually allow air into the potting mix inside, and it will also allow moisture to leave the pot from all over the pot here. That's why when you water a plant with terracotta pot, you will see that the pot will turn a dark color. That's because water is actually leaving the pot from all sides. However, if you're using just plastic pot, water has nowhere to go. So when you're watering a plant in a plastic pot, excess water will come out from the bottom of the pot, the drainage hole. But then when you leave the plant alone, water is only either evaporating from the top surface or taken in by the plant. The water is not leaving anywhere else from the pot. So you are stuck with a lot of water for a very long time when you're using a plastic pot. Number 2, terracotta pots are at least 10 times more expensive than plastic pots. For those of you with big collections or tight budget, keep that in mind, that terracotta pots can be very expensive. Number 3, terracotta pots are actually very expensive to ship because they weigh a lot more and there's a lot of packaging involved, including bubble wraps. You have to box them up, and sometimes you even have to put the crate box around it. And there's also the price of carbon footprint. When you're shipping something with so much weight on it, you're actually losing a lot of carbon footprint. So technically speaking, in terms of shipping, plastic pots is going to be the more eco-friendly option. Number 4, what if I drop 2 of these pots? Well, the terracotta is going to break. It's not going to forgive you. It's going to shatter and you're not going to be able to use it anymore. But the plastic is very durable. You can drop it, pick it up, you can throw it across the room. It will probably be fine. So if you are someone clumsy or your plants are placed somewhere where they can get knocked over by pets, children, or even yourself, be mindful of that terracotta pot does break and you can't really repair it. Number 5, terracotta pot tends to get either white salt buildups around the pot. This is when you have watered them, and usually this happens when you keep them indoors, and a lot of the salt buildups happen around the pots. I personally find them very pretty. It looks very aged, like an antique. And you can also rub them off with like a scrub and some soap. Although I would usually keep them on. I don't have any on me right now. I'm so sorry because I keep my plants outdoors for the most part. But when I kept my plants indoors in the past, I did have all those salt buildups and I find them quite beautiful. Another problem when you have pots outdoors is that they can grow algae on the outside of the pot. And those are green and slimy, which means that they're sometimes difficult to handle. And there are times when I would pick up a pot and it would be so slimy I would almost drop it. And this green slime, you can actually scrub them off with like a rough sponge and some soap. They will come right off. And the algae is actually relatively harmless for the plant. So I actually don't mind it there. It makes it a good look to it, like a very outdoorsy kind of jungle type vibe. So I don't mind it at all. Number 6, terracotta pots are made of clay, which means that it's made of renewable resources and it's also naturally biodegradable. That means that when you're done with these pots, if you break them, they will go back into the earth very quickly. They will be broken down. While plastic's raw material is non-renewable, and this does not really break down, at least not in our lifetime. So this will end up in oceans, in our landfills for a long time, and it's going to pollute our seas and our lands and our children's worlds. So if you want to be a bit more environmentally conscious, definitely do keep in mind that plastic pots does have an environmental price on it. Number 7, plastic pots can be put inside decorative pots to make them look good. We call these cash pots, and they can be made of ceramic, woven baskets, or anything literally. So you can put them in there and then it would look pretty nice. You can do that, you can put terracotta inside another pot, although nobody does it because that sounds really ridiculous. So if you like the flexibility of styling, of moving your plastic pots around and moving them to different cash pots, definitely do consider using plastic pots instead, because you can't really do that with a terracotta pot. You're basically stuck with what it is. And the next thing is that terracotta pot doesn't really tip over. As you can see here, they can hold a trailing plant really well. If you have a plant that's heavy on one side and trailing, and you have this in a plastic pot, the whole pot will topple, it will just fall off. But terracotta pots are relatively heavy and they can support a plant that way. And also if you have like a bigger plant, let's say we have a ficus here, and I give my ficus a terracotta pots because the terracotta pot will give them a sturdier pot. If you have it in plastic pot, the wind may knock it over very quickly because the plastics are actually very light. So just keep that in mind. For more sturdiness, you can use terracotta pots instead. Number 9, you can't really ship plants that are in terracotta pots. I have never seen anyone do it. Technically speaking, yes, it's doable, but you have to bubble wrap, or I don't know, you have to wrap it really well because things get jostled. This is actually very, very heavy. Things can go wrong in shipping basically. So you only want to ship plants when they're in plastic pots, and they will weigh less, which means they will cost a lot less to ship, and there's going to be a lot less damage done to the plant if something goes wrong with the shipping. So if you're considering selling your plants or sharing your plants to others, definitely plastic pots would be a better way to go. Number 10, terracotta pots can come in many shapes, sizes, and designs. They can be molded, they can be handcrafted and painted, and it's quite beautiful. Whereas your plastic pot's going to just be, black, whites, or your colorful pots in various sizes, but they don't usually come in designs. Number 11, plastic pots does come in see-through or at least opaque finish, so you can actually see the roots form. This is good for propagating plants, and I can see that there's actually condensation inside here to know that there's humidity, but I can also make sure that this is not sopping wet or soggy wet rather. So this is very good for propagation. I can keep this relatively humid but not overwatered. And this can only be achieved with plastic pots. One benefit of plastic pot is that you can actually lift the pot, and when you feel the weight of the pot, you know that the plant is well watered. Because a plant that is thirsty, let me see, this one is actually a little bit, everything's a little bit heavy, it rained today, but water is actually about 80% of the weight of the whole potting mix. So when the plant is dry, you can feel the difference just by picking up the plant. So this is when you know you don't overwater that plant. You can't do that with terracotta, obviously, because it's already so heavy that you won't be able to feel if there's dry or not. However, there is a hack that I heard from a podcast that with terracotta pots, you can actually feel it. First of all, if you look at the surface and it looks a little bit darker, sometimes you know that it is actually still pretty humid, still pretty moist inside, because water creates a darker stain around the terracotta pot. And another trick is to feel it. If it feels cool to the touch, there's probably water in it. If it feels like it's room temperature, it's probably dry. And the last thing is that terracotta pots that are like much larger, let's say you have a giant monstera or a ficus, they can be really difficult to lift up with the plant because they're going to be so heavy. So a lot of people actually put bigger plants in a plastic pot so they can be easily moved around basically. The next important thing I need to discuss is your choice of how often you want to water your plants. Some of us have busy schedules, we don't want to water our plants every day. Some of us live indoors, some of us live outdoors. So your pot type will determine how often you water your plants. And this is in combination with your potting mix and as well as your environment and watering habits. So you have to adjust all those accordingly. For example, if I put a fast draining potting mix in a terracotta pot, I may need to water it pretty frequently. But if I put that same potting mix into a terracotta pot, I may have to water it way more because fast draining potting mix with terracotta pot is going to dry out super fast and your plant may just dry out way too much. So some species actually like this, so another thing to consider is the species that you are caring for. Now, I'm going to talk about the species that love terracotta pots, and a little bit of disclaimer here, I'm talking about species that are grown in my environment, which is very high humidity, very warm, tropical climate, and also the fact that I'm a heavy-handed waterer. I water like crazy, I hose my plants down. I love it. It's better than coffee in the morning when I can hose down all my plants. So yeah, some of the species that really love terracotta pots in my care is the Monstera, Philodendrons, Anthuriums, Ficus, Sansevierias, Calatheas, Orchids, Cacti and Succulent, Peperomia, Zizi, Hoya, Dischidias, and Jungle Cacti. And the species that love plastic pots in my environment would be Alocasia, and I'm quite surprised by this. I have Alocasias grown in terracotta and plastic pots. It seems to me that they do like to hold on to a little bit of moisture. They don't like to dry out too completely like your Philodendrons and Monsteras. So my Alocasias are thriving in plastic pots with arid potting mix better than terracotta. And then there's Crotons, Coleus, Ferns, Begonias, Pothos, spider plants, peace lilies, flowering type plants, and a lot of the herbs that are very thirsty. They do appreciate plastic pots a little bit more. Now, I'm going to repeat something about pot sizes that I mentioned before a long time ago in my other videos, that you should always keep your pots tight. That means that the root ball of the plant, because every plant has different size root ball depending on the species and the age and maturity of the plant, but the root ball should not take up more than 50% of the volume of your potting mix. That means that in a pot, your roots should be maybe 50 to 75% of the whole volume of your pot. You're not going to be putting a lot of potting mix in the pot. And I'm going to tell you why. Here are some points. Number one, this is so that the plant, instead of focusing all its energy on pushing out new roots, trying to compete space with other plants in the soil, which is what they do in nature, the plants are going to be focusing its energy to produce shoots and leaves instead, because plants actually do get to choose how they want to thrive and survive in the wild. This is especially true for a lot of things that are climbing, epiphytes, aeroids. Number two, when you have a tighter pot, you also have less room for pests and fungi to live with your plant in the pot. So it minimizes that incident. Number three, you're less likely to overwater it if you're putting your plants in a tight pot, because if you put a tiny ass plant in a huge pot, there's going to be a lot of water sitting around in the pot, and that's going to invite bacteria, fungi, and pests into, like especially fungus gnats, into the plant. Number four, you're going to use a lot less fertilizer and a lot less pesticide when you're keeping your plants in a tight pot. Imagine if you have a huge pot, you're going to waste all that fertilizer because it's going to just drench through the pot, not being used up by the plant. And this goes the same with your pesticide as well. And as you know, a lot of the chemical fertilizer and pesticides are actually not very good for our environment. A lot of them are made with chemicals and they actually destroy our environment. So I want you guys to be mindful of that. On top of that, it also saves some costs when you're not spending so much money on pesticides and fertilizers. Number five, when you keep your plants in a tight pot, it gives you a chance to repot them often. And I'm talking about every 6 to 12 months. And this is actually a very joyful process for me. I get to open up the plant, check for pests, and sometimes there's pests underneath. So it's a good idea to repot your plants quite frequently. And I get to also look at the root pore and see how they're developing, study the roots, and then move them to a pot that's a little bit bigger when you upsize them, when you repot them. Number 6, you get to save money on pots because smaller pots obviously cost a lot less money. And number 7, you can save money on your potting mix because when you have less potting mix to go in there, you can save some money. Number 8, you can save so much space. Look at all these plants that I have here in tight pots. You can go ahead and buy more plants because you have the room for it. Imagine if all of these plants were in a big pot, which actually a lot of them came in. I had to repot them to a smaller size pot. That would look terrible and I would just not have enough space for everybody. And the last point, which is number 9, would be that the plant would look so terrible if you have a tiny plant in a large pot. It looks so much better when they're kept in a tight pot like this. Whether you want to photograph them or you want to style them around the house, they just look so much better. So I'm gonna quickly show you guys a tour to see some of my terracotta pots. I have some interesting ones to show you. I'm gonna also maybe do some storytelling to share with you some of the species and why they're thriving in certain types of pots and how I care for them in those pots. So come along with me. I start with this guy right here. It's in a sheep pot. This is actually terracotta pot that is painted. And I got this pot particularly because of this cactus. It's so befitting. Very cute. I remember I got this pot in Bangkok and it wasn't that expensive. And I actually use terracotta pots for my cacti and succulents because they need to dry out faster. And in my condition, Calatheas do need to dry out very quickly. So I give them a terracotta pot that is actually meant for orchids. So it's got holes down here and it's doing really, really well. This guy was actually struggling for a long time before I moved it into terracotta pot. I give it very fast draining and airy potting mix and I water it lightly every day so it gets really humid potting mix that dries out really fast because Calatheas rot easily in my climate. In here we actually have another orchid terracotta pot and as you can see they have these holes here and this is a really beautiful orchid that is doing really well and yeah, they love terracotta pots. They have to dry out really fast here. They don't like to be sitting in moisture. Over here we have a Dracaena or Sansevieria. I grew it from a tiny plant. It was just one of these clumps and now it's given me so many clumps. It's really pretty. And I gave it a terracotta pot with like a face on it. So it looks really pretty from many, many angles. And Sansevierias, they love terracotta pots because they need to dry out very quickly. And next to it is a baby Ficus Elastica Tineke. It's so pretty. And I gave all my ficuses actually a terracotta pot because they do need to dry out relatively fast and this will give them something sturdy because I keep them outdoors and they get blown by the wind so they can easily topple if I don't give it a terracotta pot. So over here we have a pencil stick cactus and it's doing really well in a concrete pot. And concrete pots actually dry out pretty fast, very similar to your terracotta pots. And aesthetically, I love the way they look. It's like this beautiful gray color. And as you can see here, water is trying to leach out of this pot, which is very good. It means that it's going to dry out pretty fast. Next to it here, we do have a beautiful baby fern. And I grow all my ferns in plastic pots because they cannot be dried out. And I just put it into this coconut pot that I got. This is actually from a fresh coconut. So this is a good way for you to repurpose some of your used coconuts, I guess. Here we have a Peperomia Obtusifolia Variegata. Unfortunately, I cut the top off for propagation. The top looks like this actually, all the baby leaves. It's really beautiful and variegated, but the old leaves become this dull color. But not to worry because all these new leaves are gonna become this beautiful yellow variegation. But I digress. This is actually in a ceramic pot that I got from Bangkok. So this is very pretty and it's painted over here. So I got this Homalomena silver not very long ago. And I actually did not repot this. It came in a really nice, fast draining, airy potting mix here in a plastic pot combination, which means it's gonna dry out pretty fast. Homalomenas don't want to dry out too much between waterings. This is so pretty. And some of you guys are asking, like, do I repot a plant immediately when I get it? Well, it depends. If the plant is happy and if the potting mix and the pot is fine for it, I just leave it alone. I'm not going to bother it. If something's not broken, don't fix it. Behind here we have a begonia. This is really pretty, and this is actually propagated. So I have so many of these cuttings. This is one of my favorite begonias. It's got really beautiful red backs, and it does like plastic pot, as you can see here, with my jungle floor potting mix, which is very, very airy. So it's constantly humid in there, but the potting mix doesn't drown this plant because it's got a lot of air movement in there. And here I believe this is an Opuntia, which is I think a cactus. And it's loving its terracotta pot. It's doing really well. It's grown these 2 ears over here. So for cacti and succulents, definitely do give them terracotta pot. They will appreciate them, especially here in my high humidity climate. Okay, back here we do have a ruffle fern here that is a baby. I propagated it, and it's in this really cute watering can that my mom got. Super cute. And what you can also do is take this out. Hang on. I'm gonna put something else in here. It's gonna look so wild. Look at that. That looks so cool. So this is a Dischidia, Nummularia, Variegata that I propagated, and I put it in this husk. So it looks like really pretty. It looks like it's living on a tree and in a tin can. I really love this look. It's really nice. So here's a fern that is in a plastic pot, and I do have to water this every day because it lives outside, and ferns love moisture. They cannot be left to dry out at all. If I put this in a terracotta pot, I may have to water it at least 3 times a day, probably. It's such a thirsty plant. Here's an air plant, a Tillandsia. It doesn't need a pot. You can give it one. You can give it something to sit on, like a throne or something, or some books. Maybe these books are its pot right now. But air plants don't need pots, so if you hate pots, they're not your thing, definitely do consider getting air plants. This is so pretty. And back here we have a Philodendron Brazil. This is in a glazed terracotta pot. And when you have terracotta pot that is glazed, you have to treat it like a plastic pot because the glazing doesn't allow moisture to leave the pot, so it's going to dry out very slowly. I actually had a ZZ plant living in this pot before, and I overwatered it. It basically turned to mush. So just keep that in mind when you have a glazed pot. You're more likely to overwater the plant, so you have to back off watering for these. Over here, this is a variegated Adansonii. Sorry, my mind went blank for a minute. And I got this as a 2-leaf cutting, and I lost the first 2 leaves, and it just kept growing. And I have a video on this up on YouTube when I got it. And now it's grown beautifully, and I'm really thankful I didn't lose this plant. And this, for expensive plants, I actually put them in terracotta pots only because I don't want them to be overwatered, especially Adansonii. They're very, very prone to overwatering, a lot of monsteras. So to be safe, I put all of my expensive plants in terracotta pot instead so that I don't really overwater them. I think we saw this Epiphyllum earlier on, and this terracotta pot just makes them dry out a little bit faster, and they love it. And this pot can also hold the weight of this plant so it doesn't really topple. It's a really, really wonderful combination. And also I love the aesthetic. And look at the shape of the pot, the color of the pot, and also the plant itself. It's just such a beautiful, visually pleasing combination. So I do recommend terracottas for a lot of your epiphyllums and your ripsalis. And here we have a baby Pastazanum. Well, maybe not a baby anymore. I got this plant, I think 6 months ago, and it's like a teenager now. It's getting pretty big. It will get huge though. And I put it in a terracotta pot, and I keep the pot very tight. Sorry, my room is super messy. Yeah, I keep the pot very, very tight because this is actually very unforgiving with overwatering. Gloriosus, Pastazanums, and all these philodendrons, they really hate water. So you really have to back away with watering, and in my case, I do have to give them fast draining potting mix. Here's an Alocasia, Macrorrhiza, Variegata. I have this grown in a terracotta pot as well, like a duplicate, but this one in plastic pot is doing so much better. It's happier here. I give it a very chunky aerate potting mix, and I give them just a little bit of direct sunlight, and they love it. They like the pot, I guess, to retain a little bit more moisture than the terracotta pots. The ones that are in terracotta pots tend to give me a little bit of browning tips too, which can also signal a bit of underwatering. I've got two huge monsteras here. Well, actually one for now, but I'm actually air layering this. As you can see, this is trading to the next pot over, and I put this aerial root down into the next pot, and I'm gonna cut it right here when this has rooted. So it's gonna give me two huge monsteras because I messed up the first monstera. I burnt it really badly outdoors. This was before I knew how to care for them, and this is so badly torn. So I'm gonna have two plants out of this. But I'm gonna digress. I was gonna show you the pot. This is actually huge, and it's a good thing that I go to the gym because I can kind of carry it. It's a bit of a struggle, but I can imagine a lot of people will have a struggle moving this plant around. So keep that in mind if you guys are not able to carry such a heavy pot. Do stick with plastic pots instead. Here's a Peperomia Variegata. And this one died, but they were propagated at the same time and they were kept right here where the conditions are exactly the same, but the one in terracotta pot is doing really well. So a lot of peperomias actually do like terracotta pots. That's what I noticed with a lot of the species, and this one rotted off, and I have a feeling this one may be a little bit too overwatered, and I kind of leave it outside where it gets rained on. For peperomias, I definitely vouch for terracotta pot, and also it looks so much better on them. Look at that. That's such a good look on them. This is a pretty weed. Hello. It's so beautiful. So this is a Peperomia Incana in a terracotta pot, and actually painted this pot in Bali. I do like painting terracotta pots. They're so much fun, but I haven't learned how to fixate their paint to make sure that the paint will last. Although I don't mind that it's a little bit aged over time. But yeah, terracotta pot painting may be a cool and fun thing to do. So over here we have a lot of these zigzag cactus, and they're propagating away. And next to it we have a lot of pothos and joy. And when I'm working on a project like this, I have to use plastic pots because I can't afford terracotta pots for these. So I may sell these at some point because I do, and first of all, I do enjoy growing them. Like, look at all these tiny buds that are just starting to form. Look at the baby leaves. Very cute. I enjoy growing them, but I can't possibly keep all of them here in my home, so I will sell them at some point so I have more money to buy more plants. Here's some Anthurium Vittarifolium, and it's actually very heavy on one side as they trail down, so terracotta pots are actually a very good option for them. So we're outside where some of these plants get direct sunlight, partial direct sunlight, and these are loving their terracotta pots. And I put some begonias here. Actually, they are a little bit shaded by other plants on top, and I gave them terracotta pots here. But I did notice that the edges are crisping, so I realized that maybe terracotta pot is, oh, look at the baby here. Oh, that's an Epiphyllum, sorry, that's not from this begonia. So I find that maybe this may appreciate a plastic pot if I can repot this, because it's drying out a little bit too fast for them. And I also give it my forest floor potting mix as well. So these Epiphyllums are just taking off. They love being in a forest floor potting mix and in a plastic pot where I guess they are a little bit more moisture loving than your other plants, but they cannot be soggy wet. Just keep in mind. Look at all these baby pups. These can all be propagated. I love my Epiphyllums. Look at that. There's another one over here that's purple. Very pretty. They are very, very fast growers. Unstoppable. And there's a fern here. It's trying to unroll a new leaf, and ferns live in plastic pots. Here's a Vanda orchid, and this is such a cute pot. It's not even really a pot, is it? It's like sitting in an air balloon, right? And this is just the basket that it's sitting on. It's very, very cute. I like that. And over here, I'm going to show you a little bit of macrame situation happening, and it's really pretty. So whether you have plastic or terracotta pots, you can absolutely give them a macrame hanger and let them hang. It's so pretty. I love the flower with that little bit of macrame in the background. It's such a really beautiful tribal look. Hoyas, they actually love terracotta pots. They do better in it because it dries out a lot faster and you're not as prone to overwatering it. I do water this plant every day and it gets some direct sunlight and it's loving it. So with your Hoyas, if you want to give it a plastic pot, just back off with watering a little bit. Don't water them as frequently. Here we have some very thirsty plants, and they're all living in plastic pots. This is a coleus, a croton, and they love full sun and frequent watering. They cannot be left to dry out. This is a variegated hibiscus, and this is more crotons. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If I had this in a terracotta pot, they may dry out a little bit too fast. They may not be too happy in it. And these are my succulents, and they're in terracotta, or that's a concrete pot over there. And they need to dry out really fast. Like this one here, this is so cute. I forgot the name of this Crassula, maybe some Moonglow. It's such a beautiful pot that I got from Thailand. Very inexpensive. And yeah, when you're traveling and you see some cute pots, definitely do consider getting them. Look at how cute this is. Oh, this is putting out a baby. How nice. Yeah, this aloe vera there in terracotta. And these are my succulent bowls. Down here we have a lot of pothos and philodendrons that are more trailing, and we have some scindapsus over there. And these are all pretty much living in plastic pot. And some of these ferns here are living in plastic pots too. I do have to water them every day. They're very, very thirsty. And this is some Philodendron Mexicanum. Normally I would put them in terracotta pot because they need to dry out quite a bit between watering. Look at how big this new leaf is. These are all propagates by the Philodendron Mexicanums. But I plan to sell these, that's why they're in plastic pots. However, I just never got around to photographing them and selling them, and they're just growing, so I may grow them out here. They are just so happy here. But it is a beautiful philodendron. I love the red stem, petiole, and whenever they unfurl a new leaf, it's just so pretty, and I don't have the heart to sell these. So here's an example of a very, very, very fast draining situation. I have Sansevieria here growing in plastic pot and leca, and over here we have the same species growing in terracotta pot and leca. This dries out really fast. I literally have to water this every day, but Sansevierias, they love to dry out quite a bit between waterings, so that's really great for Sansevierias. And I have these two philodendrons. This is a Plowmanii and that's a gloriosum, kind of in this corner because it's shaded from the rain. I used to just leave it out where it gets rained on, and even though I gave it terracotta pot aroid potting mix, which is very, very fast draining, they lost a lot of leaves. Like look at this, this is yellowing and falling off because it's overwatered, and I lost 2 leaves, and I lost some of the leaves here as well. So keep in mind, even though you give them a fast draining potting mix and pot combination, some species just really hate water, and you just need to keep them away from the rain. You just need to back off from watering with some of these plants. Imagine if I had these in plastic pots, they would have died by now because they would be sitting in water. So I'm really grateful to have terracotta pots for these plants. Here's a Maranta Kerchoveana living in a pot that's the shape of a butt. I showed this on Instagram before. I'm going to leave a link on where to buy this pot. It's actually a pot maker in Bali that makes them. Very cute. Down here we have some Alocasias, jewel Alocasias. I actually just moved this one into a plastic pot, as you can see here, which is a little bit bigger than before. And the other 3 are still living in these terracotta pots. And I noticed that the ones in terracotta pots, while they're doing really well, that new leaf is pretty big, they have to be watered 2 to 3 times a day because they will dry out pretty fast. They become very thirsty creatures in terracotta pots. This is the fry deck. So I may have to repot them into a plastic pot soon, because I guess Alocasias may prefer a little bit of moisture. They don't want to dry out as much. I had actually a bigger plant before. It died off because I had it in a plastic pot. They really, really hate moisture, this Philodendron Ring of Fire. And this actually is a cutting that survived, and I'm so glad it did. And I now put it in a terracotta pot with aroid potting mix to make sure it doesn't get overwatered. And actually here is a Homalomina army. I forgot the name of it, but I also lost this plant. This was actually a stump. It was grown in a plastic pot because it was overwatered. So now it's grown back, and I'm really thankful for that. And I think I see more than 2 growth points in here, so it's going to become a bushy plant. But it's so much happier now in a terracotta pot. Homalominas, they don't want to dry out completely like philodendrons, but I guess they also don't want to be sitting in water. Syngoniums, they don't care. They can live anywhere. They can live in both terracotta pots and in plastic pots. I have never struggled with any watering issues because I think they're one of the most forgiving plants around. So if you have a syngonium and you're torn between plastic or terracotta, take it easy. They can do well in either. Here's an Anthurium Warocqueanum, the queen Anthurium. It's doing really well. I used to lose some leaves. Some of them would yellow up or have crisping edges, and these are some beautiful leaves. That one is actually new. It's still hardening up. It's still unfurling. It's going to expand in size. That's an old leaf. But this is actually doing really well, and as you can see here, they don't really need a huge pot. I actually unpotted it earlier to see if I needed to upsize the pot because it may be root bound, but no, actually this is not root bound at all. So don't give your anthuriums or other plants too big of a pot. They are likely to be overwatered when you put them in a bigger pot. Ooh, and I want to show you this. It's living in really bright shade with no direct sunlight. Look at this Peperomia Argyreia, watermelon peperomia. It's doing so well. I propagated this from a tiny leaf and it's in a very, very tiny pot. It loves to be in tight pots because it cannot be overwatered. And they love to be in terracotta pot because they dry out faster. So they're putting a lot of new leaves. So this is a very, very happy plant. And if you guys are struggling with your Peperomia Argyreia, I do have a video on those. And one of my recommendations is to propagate them and start the new plant in your environment because the new plant will be doing much better. It will be well adapted to your environment compared to the ones that you bring back from a nursery, because actually these peperomias, they're not very adaptable to being moved. That's another one over here actually. We also in a terracotta pot. Very cute. This is actually behind my plant studio where I do a lot of potting up and propagation, and these are some of the terracotta pots that I have back here. I actually did a shopping spree on terracotta pots last week, so I have a lot in stock. I'm going to show you some of them that are indoors later on. Oh, and I don't have enough storage, so I keep all my pots in like every corner that I can find. There are some over here. Let me show you around. There are some in that corner over here. And there's some over here. This is actually quite pretty. I don't know what to grow in this yet, but this is a beautiful terracotta pot. They can come in so many designs. And let me see, there's two over here. Those square ones are really fun. Let me show you. Love the way these look. So I've got these hanging out here. And there's some back there. Some here. They actually make really good background. They don't really look terrible actually. And there's some over there. I'm very messy. I'm sorry. I don't really have a designated storage area. I should, but I don't have time to organize everything. So I'm going to show you some terracotta pots that are indoors. And I think we should conclude our tour because I don't know what else to say about these pots. Just wanted to show you some of the options and for pots. And this is actually very cute. This is another Dischidia Nummularia Variegata that I think I showed you a pot upstairs before. Look at that, it's actually attached itself to the pot. So there's something really cool about terracotta pots. And if I want to unpot this, if I want to move it to a different pot, I may have to soak this whole thing in water so that the roots will be loose from the pot, because roots tend to grip onto terracotta pots too well and you may damage the roots if you yank it out. So do soak your plants in water before you take them out of terracotta pots, I guess. There's a string of dolphins too, very cute. Yeah. So here's a frequently asked question. This is a Peperomia Hope, it's so pretty. And I put it into this beautiful tin can that used to be for tea, I believe. And a lot of you guys are asking, you know, oh, what kind of potting mix do I use? Do I have drainage holes in it? Well, the secret is this, it's actually living in a tiny plastic pot, and this is just a cash pot. So if you have any kind of tin can that's pretty, biscuit tins or whatever, do reuse them because they look just so nice. Don't throw things away. And here's also one that is in an urn, like a very oriental looking urn, and this is just a fern that's living inside. Oh, this is light. I may have to water this soon. Yeah. Over here we have some leca situation, and I think you saw this in my Tradescantia Nanouk video, and this is doing quite well. It's in a wine or shot glass, and this is actually in a jar. So this is a pickle jar actually. Very pretty, and they're doing so well. This is Peperomia Obtusifolia, and that one's doing really happy. Look at the new growth. This one's in a science beaker. I love the way this looks. Look at that with this leca. And I guess these are considered pots, right? Maybe. For leca, the pot setup is actually a little bit different from your potted plants. So over here we have a, I don't know what do you call this? This is from Amsterdam when I went there 2 years ago. And actually people hang this on their door. So there is a hole down, there you go. And this, put a nail on the wall and just hook this. However, I figured that this actually makes a really good drainage hole, and I just started putting potting mix there and Peperomia in it, and hopefully it'll take off and grow really. So this pot was, and I'm gonna include the name of the artist. It's a local Indonesian artist that made this, and it's so pretty. And I don't have the heart to use this yet, but I think a Sansevieria would look really nice on top. And here's another pot. I believe it's from East Java, very far away. Ship everything with crazy bubble wraps. So there's so much plastic waste that goes into these guys, and I am tempted not to order from them again. The price on them are really nice, and look at the pot design. This is really something. They're very inexpensive. I'm gonna leave the name of the store on the screen so you guys can decide if you want to buy them. And I do get DM for this very often. A lot of you guys are asking if they can buy pots here in Indonesia and have them shipped to other countries. Unfortunately, I can't help in that avenue because, you know, a lot of the Indonesian businesses are actually not open to trade with overseas. I don't know why. And shipping overseas is actually very expensive here. Importing stuff is very expensive as well. We're not very friendly with global trade, which is something that hopefully one of you guys are watching here. Maybe you're working with the Trade Commission or the government in Indonesia. This is a message that, you know, hey, we need to start opening up our economies and our logistics worldwide so that people can order all these beautiful Indonesian crafts. This is also a terracotta pot that's painted with the cross stitch as the eye. So yeah, unfortunately now I don't have a solution. For those of you who are asking if you guys can buy pots here, the answer is no. A lot of the sellers don't speak English, and we don't have any capabilities of shipping them to you in a cost-efficient manner. And we just don't have all those things that enable us to ship. So sorry about that. Hopefully that will change. And down here we have a lot of cash pots that I keep here. It's from Thailand. I love it. That's a golden looking urn. Basket weaving as well, and some of the ferns look really beautiful in them. So yeah, there's that. But what I really want to show you are these. Ta-da! That is my mom's mask. So these are actually bought from the same seller as before. They are from East Java. Very pretty, very inexpensive, super cute designs. And unfortunately, I don't think they do ship internationally. And yeah, this is such a beautiful pot. Look at that. It's stitched into the terracotta. Very beautiful craftsmanship. Very affordable. And I don't have the heart to use this yet because it just looks so nice over here. And this, I love tiny pots. They're babies. Look at them, the baby pots. And this one have legs. I really love terracotta pots actually. I know that some of you guys are not a big fan of them. This looks like an ashtray actually. And that one's a little piggy. Hello. Very cute. And this one has really nice lines to it. This is going to be very nice for a small succulent bowl, or even as a small bowl of pothos. It might be really cool as well. So I guess that's all I have for you today. I know I rambled on too much, and this is becoming a show-off video for pots. I feel lucky to have all these options in Indonesia that are not expensive, and I hope that we can open up trade with other countries soon. I'm at botanist on Instagram if you wanna DM me on any questions regarding plant care and propagations. Meanwhile, do take care and stay safe. I will see you in the next video. Bye.